Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. In the endless twilight of the galaxy, where every shadow whispers of extinction and madness, one ruler has endured when all others fell to dust. The silent king Sarek, supreme lord of the Necron dynasties, carries the burdens of ages older than suns. Yet even among the nightmares that walk reality, the unending threat of chaos, the madness of the warp, the hungry gods of old, there is a dread that chills him to the marrow of his living metal. The Tyranids are not just another enemy. They are a terror that words fail to capture, a storm that promises only oblivion, and the one force that has truly shaken Sarek's certainty in victory. Sarek's return to the galaxy was not a triumphant homecoming. After millennia spent drifting in the utter black of intergalactic space, his mind was haunted by regret and shaped by solitude. The once proud king who exiled himself to atone for the horror of biotransference returned to a realm transformed, broken, and roiling with threats both ancient and new. When the silent king re-emerged, he did so with the weight of endless failure pressing on his soul. A failure not just of rule, but of hope itself. He gazed upon a Necron empire fractured, its dynasties at war with each other, or fallen to the slow decay of madness. His own immortality had become a kind of curse, granting him not power, but the inability to forget all he had lost. The galaxy that awaited him was no longer a domain to rule, but a place of festering wounds and old enemies made new again. What struck Sarek most, however, was the shifting balance of terror. Once, the Necrons had believed themselves the apex predators, creatures of pure reason, untouched by emotion, wielders of sciences so profound that reality itself bent to their will. Even the warp, with its howling madness and demonic corruption, had once been contained, sealed away by the Catan, or at the very least understood as a known danger. The Silent King's mind, ancient and sharpened by endless aeons, found comfort in the familiar patterns of war against such foes. But there was something different now, something that gnawed at the edges of his mind, like the hunger of the void. During his long exile beyond the galactic rim, Sarek had glimpsed shapes in the darkness, vast, moving shadows, fleets of living things so immense and so alien, they made even the Necrons seem insignificant by comparison. It was not merely their size, but their nature, that unsettled him. These creatures were not like the ancient foes of the Necron Tyre. They were not rival empires or misguided gods or manifestations of madness. They were a force of consumption, blind and unstoppable, with a will so vast and impersonal that it crushed any hope of reason or dialogue. Sarek's decision to return was, in part, driven by this vision. A knowledge that something truly catastrophic was coming, something for which even the oldest memories of the Necrons held no precedent. The Silent King carried this secret horror with him as he began to reunite the dynasties, his every action shaped by the certainty that mere technological might and cold calculation would not be enough. There was no triumph in his return. There was only a grim urgency, a desperate drive to ready his people for a struggle that, for the first time, he feared might be unwinnable. As he set about reawakening the ancient legions and forging uneasy alliances, Sarek's thoughts returned, again and again, to those shadowed swarms he had glimpsed in the intergalactic dark. The echoes of their advance haunted his dreams, if indeed the undying can still dream. The king who once believed himself the master of fate now saw himself as little more than a caretaker of a doomed realm, racing against a hunger that threatened to erase not just his people, but the memory of everything that ever was. The burden of kingship had never been heavier, and the galaxy had never seemed so fragile. The Necrons' history with the warp is a story carved in cosmic scars, a testament to their age and the magnitude of their suffering. For them, the warp is not a source of superstitious terror, but an ancient adversary they have studied, battled, and for a time, contained. Long before mankind crawled from Terra's cradle, before even the Eldar's golden age, the Necron Tyre knew the touch of the immaterium, its unpredictable tides, its mutating influence on flesh and mind. Their wars against the Old Ones, fought across countless stars, were shadowed by the first stirrings of demonic phenomena. They watched the rise of sentient life's psychic echo, the turbulence that would one day boil into the chaos gods. This awareness brought fear, yes, but also a cold, analytical understanding. The Necrons did not cower, they calculated, built null fields and blackstone fortresses, and turned science into a bulwark against the nightmares that emerged from unreality. For Sarek, the warp is a poison, but it is a known quantity, a paradox that can be measured, perhaps even mastered. The Necrons' ancient technologies derived from Tan star magic and hard-won genius are uniquely resistant to the tricks and horrors of the Immaterium. Their bodies are soulless, immune to corruption, daemons find little to possess, and psychic assaults wash off like rain from polished stone. Even the blackest entities in the warp are denied the sustenance of Necron souls. This absence brings a strange kind of peace. In the cold logic of the Necron mind, chaos is a plague of lesser races, a disaster to be contained but not an existential threat to the undying legions. The great Toon worlds remain silent and unchanging, even as warp storms rage above. The Necron perspective is one of detachment, almost arrogance. For millions of years they have observed the cycles of demonic incursion, the rise and fall of gods, the pathetic flailing of mortals ensnared by their own nightmares. The Necrons are not invulnerable. Warp phenomena can disrupt their machines, even destroy them. But the ancient dynasties remember a time before chaos, and that memory steels them against despair. It is a kind of armor wrought from history itself. This familiarity with the warp does not breed complacency, but it does dull the edge of panic. Sarek and his cryptex approach the problems of the Immaterium as scientists dissecting a disease. Blackstone pylons and tesseract vaults were forged to suppress the warp's influence, to hem in the chaos gods and deny them their playground. Even the greatest horrors of the demonic realms, the endless hunger of Nurgle, the lustful violence of Slaanesh, the labyrinths of Tzeentch, the blood tides of Khorne, have a structure, a pattern, a logic that can be mapped and manipulated. The Silent King's mind, vast and ancient, cannot help but see the warp as just another puzzle. Terrifying, yes, but not incomprehensible. Yet there is something almost nostalgic in Sarek's view of the warp. For all its violence and madness, it is a battlefield on which the Necrons have tested themselves for eons. They have endured demonic invasions, manipulated the energies of the Immaterium, and outlasted the very gods of chaos. The ancient scars left by these wars have faded into the metal of their bodies, reminders of battles survived rather than lost. For Sarek, the warp is not a prophecy of doom, but an old enemy, a familiar shadow on the horizon. Its terrors are terrible, but they belong to a history the Silent King knows by heart. This sense of knowing, of being able to name the enemy and trace its boundaries, is the unspoken source of Sarek's confidence when it comes to chaos. The warp is monstrous, but it is also a story that has been told before, a myth with rules and limits and patterns worn into the bones of reality itself. Against such a foe, the Necrons stand with the weight of memory on their side, ready to face the dark, but never truly fearing it will devour them whole. If there is one force in the galaxy that refuses to be catalogued, dissected, or even truly observed, it is the Tyranids. When the Silent King first glimpsed the heaving tides of their living ships beyond the void, he sensed an anomaly, a threat without precedent, without history, without a mythic shape to anchor it in memory. The Tyranids are not just an army or even a civilization. They are a phenomenon, a tidal wave of biological purpose that rewrites the rules of war with every new world they consume. Their arrival is not heralded by prophecy or cosmic omen, but by silence, the cold, suffocating quiet that falls as their psychic shadow snuffs out all astral signals, every plea for help, every scream in the darkness. The horror of the Tyranids lies in their unknowability. Sarek, whose mind contains the annals of uncounted aeons, cannot classify them within any familiar schema. They are not servants of the Old Ones, nor the Citan, nor any known god or cosmic power. They possess no ideology, no ambition, no gods to place hate or philosophies to unravel. They are life stripped of meaning and complexity, weaponized by evolution into a perfect engine of consumption. Each hive fleet is a self-contained intelligence, but even that is only a facet of a deeper will, the hive mind, a presence so vast that it has no face, no voice, and no true center. For the Silent King, who has faced gods and ghosts and star-spanning empires, this is a mystery that offers no comfort, no anchor, no foothold in logic or history. What disturbs Sarek is not merely the physical scale of the Tyranid threat, though that is staggering. measured in biomass harvested and worlds rendered barren. It is the sense that the Tyranids are utterly outside the known ecosystem of the galaxy. They arrived not from within, but from beyond, bearing with them secrets older than any race that calls the Milky Way home. They are invaders from an unimaginable elsewhere, with a history and logic of their own that no Necron mind, no matter how advanced, can hope to grasp. In a galaxy defined by cycles, empires rising and falling, gods clashing, chaos waxing and waning, the Tyranids represent a break, a force that does not play by the old rules. Every attempt to learn from or about them yields only more questions. Their biology is a living nightmare of adaptability. Every weapon turned against them becomes, in time, a new strength. Where the Necrons see perfect order and predictability in their own ranks, the Tyranids are defined by monstrous improvisation, tentacles and claws and acid that shift and change with every encounter, each new strain a calculated response to opposition. Even the vaunted sciences of the cryptex find themselves stymied, reduced to frantic improvisation against a foe that seems to rewrite the laws of biology itself. For Sarek, this unpredictability is the true terror. The Tyranids offer no chance for reason, no hope for stalemate, no prospect of understanding. To him, who has spent his existence solving problems and mastering enemies, the Tyranids are a riddle without a solution, a storm whose every drop is unique, and yet whose fury is always the same. The king who once ruled by absolute certainty now finds himself haunted by doubt, compelled to confront an enemy whose very existence undermines the notion of control. The enigma of the Tyranids is not just their hunger, but their inscrutability. They are a black hole in the map of the known, a living question that swallows all answers. For the Silent King, who has seen everything the galaxy can offer, the greatest horror is this: that something truly new has arrived, something that not even a god king of metal and memory can hope to understand, let alone defeat. There is a profound irony that the Tyranids, a threat born from the cold void between galaxies, bring with them a silence so absolute that it drowns even the madness of the warp. Across a galaxy where psychic screams are as common as the stars themselves, the coming of a Tyranid hive fleet is not heralded by noise, but by an oppressive quiet that smothers hope and communication alike. The phenomenon known as the shadow in the warp is more than a tactical weapon. It is a metaphysical event, a disruption so total that it renders even the greatest psychic talents powerless. For the Silent King, who has watched the tides of the immaterium rise and fall for countless millennia, the Tyranid shadow is an abomination, a thing that not only challenges but negates the ancient certainties of his universe. On worlds beset by the Tyranids, astropaths weep blood as their minds are crushed by a pressure they cannot describe. Psychers fall silent, their powers flickering out as if a cosmic hand has placed a shroud over their souls. Even the daemons of chaos, those eternal parasites of mortal thought and suffering, find themselves unable to pierce the Tyranid veil. The shadow in the warp is anathema to everything the immaterium stands for, a denial of the very engine that powers chaos, sorcery, and psychic communication. This silence is not peace, it is annihilation, the erasure of all meaning, the reduction of existence to a single imperative: consumption. The horror of this shadow is not just that it renders the Imperium's greatest defenses inert, but that it reveals the existence of a force outside the binary struggle of reality and unreality. The Tyranids do not use the warp as a weapon or a shield. They do not seek to corrupt, dominate, or enslave. Instead, their presence is like a great null point, a negative space so profound that even the gods themselves are left voiceless. For the Silent King, who has seen empires rise and fall by virtue of their mastery or vulnerability to the warp, this is a revelation both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The rules that have governed galactic conflict for eons are swept away by a species that simply does not care. The shadow in the warp is a signal of otherness, an implacable sign that the Tyranids are not bound by the cosmic dichotomies that define the rest of the galaxy. To the Necrons, whose sciences once tamed the warp's storms and built fortresses against its nightmares, this is a crisis of understanding. There are no null rods or pylons that can counter the Tyranid silence. There are no rituals, no equations, no countermeasures that can re-establish the lost connection. For the first time, Sarek and his cryptex find themselves disarmed, not by the destructive power of the warp, but by its total absence. This psychic nullity reaches deep into the core of what it means to be alive in the galaxy. The Emperor's tarot goes blank, prophecies fail, and the choir of souls that gives the warp its music is rendered mute. Where the Necrons once stood apart, proud of their immunity to the storms of chaos, they now find themselves sharing in the universal dread that grips all sentient life under the Tyranid shadow. Even the implacable immortals feel a chill in their living metal as the old rules crumble. For Sarek, this is not just a strategic problem, but an existential one. The Tyranids do not play the game of gods and mortals. They turn off the board entirely. It is the recognition of this reality that drives the Silent King's fear. The Tyranids are not simply predators, nor are they invaders in the traditional sense. They are a force that devours not only flesh and memory, but the very fabric of meaning, psychic, spiritual, and metaphysical. In the face of such annihilation, even the oldest and most powerful beings in the galaxy are rendered small, their ancient certainties swept away by a silence that devours all shadows. It is hard to overstate the horror that comes with facing an enemy who simply does not care. Not about pain, not about victory, not even about its own survival. The galaxy is used to antagonists who, however monstrous, possess ambition, personality, or some twisted rationale. Chaos is madness, but it is madness that craves worship, attention, and corruption. The Eldar, orcs, and even the Tan move through the cosmos as actors in a story, driven by desire or hunger or pride. Against this backdrop, the Tyranids stand apart as a force so utterly devoid of personality that their presence feels like a cosmic affront. They are not evil, nor are they good. They are hunger incarnate, a will so impersonal that it chills even the hearts of immortals. For the Silent King, whose mind was shaped by gods and wars and the nuances of diplomacy, the hive mind is the ultimate terror. Its thoughts, if they can even be called that, are not those of a conqueror, a schemer, or a ruler. There are no negotiations, no threats, no ultimatums. The hive mind does not hate its enemies, nor does it acknowledge them as anything more than obstacles or resources. This indifference is a kind of cruelty beyond malice, a total absence of meaning. The hive mind cannot be reasoned with, outwitted, or seduced. It does not care for glory or vengeance or even survival. Its only imperative is to feed, to evolve, to persist. In the presence of such a force, even the most ancient and arrogant minds are left adrift. Sarek, who once commanded the loyalty of star-spanning dynasties, finds himself powerless not because the Tyranids outfight or outthink him, but because they simply do not care that he exists. There is no satisfaction in outmaneuvering an enemy who does not acknowledge the game, no pride in resisting a will that lacks the ego to even recognize opposition. The hive mind is a blank, alien will, a kind of cosmic weather that sweeps over all resistance, not out of spite, but from pure, unthinking necessity. What truly haunts the Silent King is the implication that the Tyranids are not a deviation from the universe's laws, but an expression of them. Their indifference is not a flaw, but a feature. Nature at its most brutal, stripped of all the comfort of story or motive. Where chaos offers the horror of madness, the Tyranids offer the horror of meaninglessness. The hive mind's presence is a silence in the universe's conversation, a negation so profound that it erases not just civilizations, but the very possibility of communication and understanding. Even the Necrons, who have reduced themselves to immortal machinery, feel the weight of this indifference. They were forged in the fires of hatred and loss, driven to their doom by betrayal and the agony of existence. The Tyranids have no such scars. They are not the product of tragedy or design, but of a hunger that predates emotion, memory, and hope. To Sarek, whose every decision is a reaction to ancient wounds, the hive mind is a mirror held up to the pointlessness of it all. A reminder that in the end, even the grandest empires may be nothing more than fuel for something that will never care what was lost. In the cold glare of the hive mind's indifference, all struggles for meaning seem small. The Silent King, who once believed himself the shaper of destiny, now sees the horrifying possibility that destiny itself is an illusion. A brief flare of consciousness in a universe that will eventually be swallowed by an endless, indifferent hunger. The Tyranids are not just a threat to life, but to meaning itself. And in this, Sarek finds a terror deeper than any madness the warp could ever inflict. For all their reputation as deathless legions of living metal, the Necrons possess vulnerabilities that no ancient technology or forbidden science can truly overcome. When the Tyranids descend upon a world, they do not simply slaughter, they strip it bare, devouring every molecule of organic matter and leaving behind only barren husks. The Necrons, with their soulless bodies and formidable weaponry, might seem immune to such a fate, but in truth, their strength is also their greatest weakness against the Tyranid tide. The hive fleets adapt, learn, and evolve with terrifying speed, assimilating the genetic and chemical secrets of every foe they consume. Against ordinary species, this means deadlier claws or thicker carapaces. Against the Necrons, it means something far more insidious. Sarek understands that the Tyranids are not deterred by the Necrons' lack of biomass. Instead, the hive mind views every new challenge as a puzzle to be solved, a new method of resistance to be overcome. Necron technology, so advanced that it borders on magic, presents not an impassable wall but an enticing mystery, a source of knowledge, perhaps even nourishment, for a foe whose hunger is matched only by its capacity to adapt. Tyranid bioweapons grow more resistant to Gauss fire. Their carapaces thicken against energy beams, and their digestive systems evolve to process even the rarest of elements. Already, there are rumors among the cryptechs of Tyranid organisms that can corrode living metal, or digest fragments of blackstone, or mimic the phase displacement of Necron warriors. This relentless adaptation is a direct assault on the Necron sense of invincibility. For ages, they have watched as the lesser races falter before their implacable advance, their sciences crumbling before Necron durability and firepower. The Tyranids, however, do not play by those rules. Each engagement leaves them stronger, smarter, and better equipped to deal with the unique properties of Necron constructs. Every loss is a lesson, every corpse a seed for something deadlier. Where chaos relies on corruption, the Tyranids rely on evolution. A process as unthinking and inexorable as time itself. Worse still, the Tyranids are not deterred by the absence of souls or psychic resonance. Their shadow in the warp makes even Necron communications unreliable, isolating tomb worlds and cutting them off from the carefully woven web of command. Entire legions have disappeared beneath the chitinous tides, their remains harvested for unknown purposes, their precious artifacts devoured or transformed into new biological horrors. Sarek knows that every lost crypt, every fallen dynasty becomes an unwitting source of strength for the enemy. No machine is so perfect that it cannot be broken down, understood, and reassembled in a new, more terrible form. It is this inevitability that gnaws at the Silent King's mind. The Tyranids are not just a threat to the Necrons' bodies or technology, they are a threat to the very idea of permanence. Against chaos, there is always the hope that null fields, blackstone pylons, or sheer willpower might hold the line. Against the Tyranids, resistance only ensures that the next assault will be even more devastating. No defense can last forever. No secret is safe from an enemy whose only limit is the boundaries of its own hunger. Sarek's nightmares are filled not with visions of daemons or psychic storms, but with the sight of a galaxy slowly being reshaped by the Tyranid swarm, one where even the Necrons are rendered obsolete, their greatest works digested and reborn as new tools for the hive mind's endless quest for consumption. In the face of such a foe, immortality becomes meaningless. The Necrons are no longer timeless conquerors, but just another flavor in an extinction event that does not care what came before. Only what can be consumed. For the first time in his long existence, the Silent King must confront the possibility that there may be no way to win, only a chance to delay the inevitable, and a hope that something, somehow, might stop the Tyranids before all that is left is silence. In the black gulfs between galaxies, where even the light of ancient stars is a memory, Sarek wandered for Uncaunia. His self-imposed exile was a sentence of cosmic solitude. A time for penance, yes, but also for observation. It was there, outside the boundaries of the Milky Way, that the Silent King first beheld the true shape of the Tyranid menace. Far from the chaos and noise of the living galaxy, the intergalactic void is a realm of silence so complete it borders on the sublime. Yet within that silence, Sarek discovered a deeper hunger, a living shadow that consumed not only worlds, but the very essence of hope. He watched as the vanguard organisms drifted through the emptiness, drawn by signals imperceptible to any sensor, guided by a will that had nothing to do with self or soul. Sarek's mind, used to reading the currents of politics and war, found itself dwarfed by the sheer alienness of the Tyranids' purpose. They moved like a natural disaster, heedless of the boundaries that define life and death for lesser creatures. Planets that had never known war were stripped to the core in days. Life was not merely ended, but erased, leaving nothing for memory to cling to. To witness this from the void was to watch the universe itself being rewritten in real time. A slow, inevitable extinction that left no room for resistance or hope. The Silent King was no mere spectator. He dispatched his own servants, Necron reconstructions and cryptic probes, into the paths of the oncoming hive fleets. What returned was seldom more than garbled data and distorted signals, the remnants of machines crushed beneath tidal waves of organic matter. What little could be salvaged painted a picture more frightening than anything Sarek had ever known. Hive ships the size of continents, bioforms that adapted even to the emptiness of the void, tendrils of psychic influence that snuffed out all communication before the first spores landed. There were no negotiations, no warnings, no demands, only hunger, moving at the scale of galaxies. This time in exile changed Sarek in ways no battle ever could. He came to understand that the Tyranids were not merely a threat to his people, but to the very concept of civilization. In the darkness between worlds, he confronted the possibility that even the most ancient and powerful beings might simply be swept away, their works and memories devoured by a force too immense to comprehend. The Necron king, who had once sought atonement for his crimes, now found himself wrestling with a new form of guilt. The knowledge that his people might be doomed not by their own sins, but by the arrival of a hunger that transcended morality. For all the technological marvels at his disposal, Sarek was forced to accept his own limitations. The void is not merely a place, it is a state of mind, a confrontation with insignificance. To see the Tyranids in their native element, divorced from the chaos of the galactic stage, was to see the truth of their existence. They are not an aberration or an invader, but a cosmic constant, a principle of consumption made flesh. In exile, Sarek's arrogance was stripped away. What remained was a kind of grim clarity, a determination to prepare the Necrons for a war that could not be won, only survived. It was this experience, this long, silent vigil in the cold between stars, that ultimately drove Sarek back to the galaxy. He returned not out of hope, but out of necessity, compelled by a vision of annihilation that left no room for pride or isolation. His time in the void taught him the scale of the threat and the futility of facing it alone. In the end, even the King of Immortals is shaped by what he cannot control. And Sarek's exile stands as a testament to the transformative power of fear, a fear that only the Tyranids, in all the universe, could truly inspire. There is a unique kind of despair that comes when intellect itself is rendered useless. For Sarek, whose rule has always depended on reason, foresight, and the intricate play of logic, the Tyranids present a philosophical crisis as much as a material one. The Necrons were born from the pursuit of knowledge, their entire civilization shaped by the twin engines of science and suffering. When the Cetan betrayed them, when biotransference reduced a people to soulless machines, it was intellect, cold, relentless calculation, that offered a path through darkness. Every war, every betrayal, every cosmic threat could, in theory, be analyzed and understood. Even the warp, for all its madness, has patterns and cycles that can be studied and exploited. But the Tyranids are different. They are not a problem to be solved, a logic puzzle to be unraveled. They are anti-logic, a force that breaks every model, that punishes reason with the futility of its own precision. Every time the Necrons adapt, the Tyranids counter-adapt faster. Every defensive strategy, every technological marvel is met with a mutation or a new tactic so alien that it renders prior learning useless. For Sarek, this is a form of defeat deeper than battlefield loss. It is the annihilation of the very principles upon which the Necron Empire is built. What makes the Tyranids uniquely horrifying is not just their adaptability, but the utter absence of any logic outside of survival and consumption. Empires are used to dealing with the illogical, mad tyrants, unpredictable gods, even the raw anarchy of chaos. But beneath these forces is always some kind of logic, some structure that can be mapped. With the Tyranids, there is only the churn of evolution, the mindless refinement of hunger into ever more perfect forms. Against this, the logic of strategy, politics, and science is exposed as mere wishful thinking, a brittle veneer shattered by a reality that cannot be bargained with or even understood. This failure of logic is not merely a tactical concern for the Silent King, it is a spiritual crisis, a challenge to the Necron identity itself. The Necrons have always believed that reason could triumph over chaos and chance, that intellect could bend the universe to their will. Now, as they watch the Tyranids consume and adapt at a pace that mocks even the most advanced computations, they are forced to confront the limits of their own philosophy. It is as if the universe itself is telling them that intellect is not enough, that there are hungers and forces in the dark that care nothing for the plans of immortals. The tragedy of Sarek's position is not just that he faces defeat, but that he faces irrelevance. Every loss to the Tyranids is a lesson in humility, a reminder that the universe is not a puzzle to be solved, but a storm to be weathered. The Silent King, who once saw the galaxy as a grand game of logic and power, now finds himself adrift in a sea of unpredictability, a world where the only constant is change itself. The philosophical horror of the Tyranids is that they strip away the illusions of control, revealing the cold, indifferent machinery of nature beneath. In this new reality, the greatest minds are rendered as helpless as the smallest. The Necrons' storied history, their technological marvels, their ancient wisdom, all are reduced to so much chaff before the wind. For Sarek, there is no comfort in knowledge, no solace in planning. There is only the bleak understanding that some threats cannot be reasoned with, and that sometimes the only answer is to endure. The Tyranids have forced the Silent King to confront a universe that is not merely dangerous, but fundamentally unknowable. A universe where the highest form of logic may be surrender, and where survival is measured not in triumph, but in the ability to hold on a little longer before being swept away. To witness the advance of the Tyranids is to witness the slow erasure of possibility itself. The galaxy has seen horrors before. Worlds consumed by demonic fire, civilizations ground to dust beneath Xeno's empires, souls shattered by the machinations of the warp. Yet even chaos, with all its apocalyptic madness, feeds upon something. It requires belief, fear, love, or hate. The ruin left in its wake is still in some way a perverse continuation of story. But the Tyranids bring with them a threat that goes deeper than annihilation. They are a force that promises not only death, but the deletion of memory, the end of all culture, art, and history. In their wake, there is not even tragedy. There is only nothingness. Zik knows this in his living metal core. It is not merely his own people or the ambitions of the Necron dynasties that are at risk. It is the very concept of life as an ongoing process, the fragile chain of ancestry and achievement that binds the past to the future. Every time a hive fleet descends on a world, it is as if a page is torn from the book of the universe and burned, leaving no trace behind. There is no slow decay, no echoes in the warp, not even the ghosts that haunt old battlefields. The Tyranids leave nothing that can be mourned or remembered. This is a level of threat so absolute that it unites enemies who would otherwise never speak. Sarek, for all his pride and bitterness, is compelled to recognize that the Tyranids are not just a Necron problem, or a human problem, or even a chaos problem. They are the antithesis of civilization itself. Their consumption is total, their indifference universal. To them, the glories of the Eldar are meaningless, the empire of mankind irrelevant, the nightmares of chaos just more fuel for the grinder. Even the warp, so defined by the psychic imprint of sentient thought, is muted beneath the Tyranid shadow. The hive mind does not just devour flesh, it devours the very conditions necessary for meaning to exist. In the face of this, Sarek finds himself wrestling with a dread he can barely articulate. It is not fear of death or pain, he has known both, and in some ways left them behind. It is fear of extinction in the truest sense, not just the loss of a people, but the loss of the idea that they ever were. The Necrons, for all their faults, have always believed in the sanctity of memory. Their tomb worlds are mausoleums for lost glory, Their wars are fought to preserve the story of their suffering. The Tyranids threaten to erase even that. What is a legacy if there is no one left to remember it? No record, no ruin, not even dust. This sense of finality is what drives the Silent King to such desperation. He is not merely trying to save his people, he is trying to save the possibility of memory itself. The threat posed by the Tyranids is cosmic, existential, and uniquely horrifying. For the first time, Sarek finds that he cannot even imagine what lies beyond defeat. Chaos at least offers a new shape, however twisted, to the things it destroys. The Tyranids offer only the certainty that, in time, there will be nothing left. No echoes in the warp, no bones in the sand, no stories told by survivors. Only a silence so complete it borders on the divine. A silence that makes a mockery of all ambition, all suffering, all hope. This is what sets the Tyranids apart in the Silent King's eyes. They are not just an enemy to be fought, but an ending to be averted. In their advance, the galaxy sees its own mortality reflected back, not as apocalypse, but as oblivion. It is a lesson that leaves even gods and immortals trembling, for it reveals the ultimate fragility of all things built, all things remembered, and all things loved. Sarek has always been a master of calculation. Even before the curse of biotransference, his intellect steered the Necron tire through cosmic hazards and impossible rivalries. Since his return, his strategic mind has been the one constant upon which the fractured Necron dynasties can rely. Yet never in his long existence has he been forced to contemplate such unorthodox gambits as those necessitated by the Tyranid threat. Facing a foe that cannot be reasoned with or deterred, the Silent King's every maneuver has become a desperate gambit for time. A string of impossible bargains, heretical partnerships, and untested weapons, all woven into a strategy where survival itself feels like victory. Where once the Necrons acted alone, arrogant in their superiority and disdainful of the lesser races, Sarek now finds himself contemplating alliances he would have deemed unthinkable in ages past. He recognizes, with a kind of cold humility, that no single power in the galaxy, no matter how ancient, how advanced, or how ruthless, can hope to withstand the Tyranid tide alone. This realization has led to cautious overtures, secret negotiations, and even battlefield alliances with those who, not so long ago, would have been marked for annihilation. Human commanders, Eldar seers, and even agents of the Mechanicum have found themselves approached by envoys of living metal, their offers couched in the bleak logic of mutual survival. These alliances are not born of trust. Sarek knows too well the fragility of pacts forged in desperation. Yet he understands that the hive mind's approach is a fire that does not discriminate. Every world consumed is one less bastion against oblivion. Every loss suffered by an enemy is, in truth, a loss for all. Even the vaunted technology of the Necrons is not enough. The hive fleets adapt too quickly, devour too completely. Every new tactic is a temporary reprieve. Every clever device just another lesson for the swarm. Sarek's calculations are those of a gambler who knows the odds are against him, but who also knows that inaction is certain death. This shift in strategy has not come without cost. Many within the Necron dynasties see such cooperation as weakness, a betrayal of ancient pride. Internal dissent simmers, and not a few Pharaons grumble that the Silent King has lost his way. Yet Sarek's vision is wider than any one dynasty or age. He is willing to risk the scorn of his own kind, even the fracturing of Necron unity, in pursuit of a future where something, anything, remains. He has authorized the sharing of forbidden technologies, the deployment of experimental weapons, and the construction of defenses whose only purpose is to buy a little more time before the shadow falls. For Sarek, these strategic choices are not just calculations on a cosmic chessboard, they are acts of hope and defiance. To fight the Tyranids is to reject the logic of inevitability, to insist that resistance, however doomed, is not pointless. Every alliance is a declaration that meaning can still be forged in the face of annihilation, that even the oldest of beings can learn, adapt, and strive for more than mere survival. The Silent King's plans are labyrinthine, woven from the threads of a million possibilities, each one leading to a future that, while uncertain, is at least not yet erased. In this, Sarek reveals a kind of heroism rarely seen among the undying. He is willing to gamble everything, legacy, unity, pride, on the chance that the Tyranids can be slowed, if not stopped. It is a strategy that acknowledges fear, but refuses to be defined by it. The Silent King's calculations are more than just mathematics or probability. They are an act of faith in the persistence of civilization, a belief that the galaxy is worth saving, even if only for a little while longer. For all his cold brilliance and immortal resolve, Sarek is not immune to the weight of despair. There is a loneliness in command that only the truly ancient can understand, and for the Silent King, this loneliness is made heavier by the shadows that press in from beyond the stars. His entire existence has been shaped by an overwhelming sense of responsibility, not just to his people, but to history itself. In the face of the Tyranids, this responsibility becomes a burden almost too great to bear. It is not fear of destruction that gnaws at Sarek's soul, but the fear of forgetting, of failing in his duty to keep the memory of the Necron Tyre alive. The emotional landscape of the Silent King is a bleak one, carved by loss and sharpened by the knowledge that nothing he does may ever be enough. His every action, every desperate alliance and brutal command is haunted by the specter of futility. Against chaos, there is always the satisfaction of defiance, the grim pleasure of holding the line against madness. Against mortal rivals, there is pride in victory, or at least the comfort of a worthy struggle. But against the Tyranids, Sarek finds only an emptiness that echoes louder with each new loss. The hive mind offers no recognition, no acknowledgement that the Necrons ever existed at all. The horror is not just in the prospect of defeat, but in the erasure of meaning itself. Sarek sometimes gazes upon his own reflection, an eternal monarch cast in gleaming metal, once a living being, now a vessel for endless regret. The pride that sustained him through the cataclysm of biotransference, through the wars against the Old Ones and the Gitan, now feels like an illusion. The more he struggles, the more the universe seems to remind him of its indifference. Each tomb world lost to the swarm is another memory snuffed out. Another chapter closed, not with a bang, but with silence. The ancient Necron rituals of remembrance, the recitation of dynastic lineages, the ceremonial awakening of old allies, take on a new, tragic resonance. They are not just acts of tradition, but acts of resistance against oblivion itself. The emotional toll is compounded by isolation. Sarek cannot truly share his fear, not with his subordinates or the other dynastic lords. To admit despair is to admit weakness, and the Necrons cannot afford even a whisper of weakness. The king, who must be seen as infallible, suffers in private, wrestling with doubts that would shatter the minds of lesser beings. He is haunted by visions of a galaxy swallowed whole, of his people's legacy consumed and forgotten, of his own name reduced to nothing. In rare moments of solitude, he wonders if his ancient quest for redemption was ever more than a cruel joke played by the universe, a longing for meaning in a cosmos that cares nothing for kings or memories. And yet, within this despair, a kind of bitter hope persists. The fact that Sarek still fights, still calculates, still tries to buy another moment for his people, is itself a triumph over hopelessness. His dread is not a paralysis, but a catalyst, a reason to act, no matter the odds. If the Tyranids represent the end of memory, then every second of resistance is a victory. Every small survival a defiance of oblivion. Sarek's pain is matched only by his determination. In a galaxy where even gods are afraid, the Silent King's greatest strength may not be his intellect, but his refusal to surrender to despair. This is the true emotional weight of the Tyranid threat, a despair that is as vast as the stars, and a hope that refuses to be extinguished. It is the paradox at the heart of Sarek's rule, the knowledge that he may lose everything, and yet the certainty that so long as he remembers, something of the Necrontyr will endure. In the end, what truly sets the Tyranids apart is not their hunger, nor even their scale, but the unique kind of fear they inspire in beings like the Silent King. Sarek, who has seen the galaxy reshaped by gods and monsters, who has weathered the storms of chaos and the treacheries of eternity, stands now before an adversary that is more than just a threat to life. The Tyranids are a force that strips away not only the flesh, but the soul of the galaxy, devouring memory, erasing legacy, and silencing every story that has ever been told. In the face of the warp and its daemons, the Silent King sees an ancient struggle, a cycle of violence and madness that, however terrible, still leaves something behind. But when he looks into the abyss of the hive mind, he sees nothing reflected back. No future, no meaning, only the certainty of oblivion. It is this certainty, this chilling promise of a universe without witness or remembrance, that drives Sarek's terror deeper than any fear the warp could ever conjure. Against chaos, there is always a struggle, a mad, endless dance of resistance, corruption, and redemption. Against the Tyranids, there is only the promise that everything will be consumed, and that even the memory of resistance will fade. The Silent King fears the Tyranids because they are not just the end of a people or a civilization, but the end of the very possibility of civilization itself. Their hunger is infinite, their logic alien, their indifference absolute. In their advance, the old games of gods and mortals, the ancient grudges and glorious victories all become meaningless. Yet within this terror, there is also a lesson for all who look to the stars with hope or dread. Sarek's fight against the Tyranids is not just a battle for his own kind. It is a stand for the value of memory, story, and existence itself. The galaxy may yet find ways to endure. Civilizations may rise and fall, but as long as someone remembers, there is meaning. The true tragedy would be to surrender, to allow that silence to fall without a final cry of defiance. The Silent King's greatest fear is also his greatest motivator. That by refusing to accept oblivion, by fighting even when the odds are hopeless, something of what was will endure, even if only as a whisper against the dark. Through all his suffering, Sarek has come to understand that memory is both his greatest weapon and his greatest curse. Among the countless dead and the eternal metal tombs, the Silent King is the sole living witness to a story that spans not just millennia, but the whole sweep of cosmic history. In every calculated step, in every risk and alliance, he draws on a memory so vast that it sometimes threatens to overwhelm even his post-human mind. Yet now, confronted with the Tyranid threat, memory itself becomes a battlefield, a contested ground between hope and despair, legacy and oblivion. It is memory that fuels the rituals of the Necron dynasties. The processions through vast galleries of silent statues, the incantations spoken to machines older than empires, the somber awakening of ancient overlords. All are acts of remembrance, attempts to hold back the darkness with stories of what was. Sarek, more than any other, feels the weight of this remembrance. He remembers not only the glories, but every betrayal, every moment when pride or rage or desperation led his people one step closer to damnation. The slow corruption of the Necron Tyre by the Ctan, the agony of biotransference, the endless wars that followed. Each moment is carved into his consciousness as if into black stone. He has lived so long that the memories themselves feel like living things, pressing against his every decision, a jury that never stops judging. Facing the Tyranids, these memories become both shield and torment. On the one hand, they remind Sarek of the persistence of life, the ability of even the most wounded civilization to adapt and endure. He remembers the resurrection of dynasties thought lost, the revival of ancient sciences in the ashes of war, the rare moments of peace when the galaxy felt, for a heartbeat, whole. He recalls the Necrons' ability to build monuments that have lasted longer than some stars, to devise strategies and weapons so complex that even the old ones were brought low. There is hope in these memories. The knowledge that survival is not always about winning, but about refusing to be erased. But memory is also the root of the Silent King's deepest terror. For every victory, there are 1,000 losses. For every moment of hope, a cascade of pain. Sarek remembers every tomb world lost, every dynasty that fell into madness or silence, every time his wisdom proved insufficient to prevent disaster. As the Tyranids advance, these memories sharpen into dread. He knows that the threat they pose is not just to life, but to the very continuity of memory, the threads that connect past to present and give meaning to the future. If the Tyranids succeed, all those stories, all those sacrifices will vanish as if they never were. This confrontation with oblivion drives Sarek to the brink. He finds himself caught between the duty to remember and the agony that remembering brings. To fight the Tyranids is, in a way, to fight for the right to remember at all. To insist that the suffering and endurance of his people must not be swallowed by the void. Every defensive gambit, every alliance forged, every sacrifice made is a prayer that something will survive to bear witness. He knows that he cannot stop the Tyranids alone, but as long as he persists, there is a chance, however slim, that memory itself can outlast the hunger. The Silent King also reflects, with a kind of wounded awe, on how even the most enduring memory can falter in the face of the hive mind. There is no mourning in the wake of the Tyranids, no relics, no ruins, no psychic echoes. Their silence is not the silence of the tomb, but the silence of erasure. Sarek wonders if this is what true death looks like, not an ending, but a blankness, an unraveling of the very fabric of story and self. In this, he recognizes the true stakes of the war being fought, not just survival, but the preservation of everything that allows meaning to exist. Amid these thoughts, Sarek sometimes dares to imagine that there is hope, even in the darkest struggle. Perhaps it is not the vast monuments or unbroken dynasties that matter most, but the persistence of remembrance itself. So long as there are those who resist, who refuse to forget, the Tyranids cannot win completely. Every act of defiance, every memory passed from one being to another, is a spark against the infinite dark. Sarek's own suffering, his refusal to yield, becomes an emblem of this truth. In a galaxy that often seems bent on erasing itself, the will to remember is itself a kind of victory. In the end, memory is all that Sarek has, and all that he can offer to the galaxy. Whether the Necrons survive or are swept away, whether the hive mind consumes all or is turned aside by some unforeseen miracle, the Silent King's greatest gift may be the example of endurance. To fight, to remember, to endure, even when hope itself seems lost. This is the message that Sarek carries and the burden he refuses to surrender. In a galaxy threatened by silence, it is the persistence of memory that makes resistance possible, and that ensures, if only for a while longer, that the darkness does not win. Hope in the grimdark future is often an afterthought, a glimmer soon swallowed by the vast, indifferent night. Yet, even as the galaxy teeters on the brink, Sarek discovers something quietly radical in the behavior of those he once dismissed. Among the lesser races, hope is not a calculation or a strategy. It is an instinct, a fire that burns regardless of logic or odds. Sarek, for all his power and memory, once regarded this as naivety, a tragic flaw destined to fail against the machinery of fate. But as he witnesses the approach of the Tyranid apocalypse, this small, stubborn hope begins to reshape his vision of what survival and meaning might truly entail. The Silent King is accustomed to seeing the galaxy in terms of grand strategy, armies, resources, ancient technologies awakened or entombed. Yet now, his eyes are drawn to moments he would have once overlooked. Human soldiers on doomed worlds, continuing to fight as the sky darkens and the air itself turns toxic. Eldar farseers who glimpse the certainty of their own extinction, yet still weave desperate plans to save a single craft world or the last soul of a lost kindred. Even among the orcs, there is a wild joy in resistance, a refusal to accept the end simply because it is inevitable. These small, almost meaningless become in Sarek's eyes something more, a spark that persists when all else is ash. It is not lost on Sarek that hope, in this context, is an act of rebellion. The hive mind, with all its pitiless logic, cannot comprehend such impulses. The Tyranids consume without passion or hesitation, but they also cannot inspire or remember. Their advance is perfect in its indifference, but it leaves no room for the moments of transcendent meaning that mark a conscious mind. To hope, to risk, to fight when all logic says surrender is a kind of magic, a defiance that the Tyranids can never replicate or understand. Sarek begins to see that in a galaxy where the old rules are breaking down, this human and Xeno's refusal to let go of hope may be the last weapon left. The psychological impact of this revelation is immense. For the first time in countless ages, Sarek allows himself to feel something that is not merely regret or duty. He feels a kinship, however reluctant, with those who fight for more than survival. He finds inspiration in their stories, remembering the ancient Necron legends of defiant last stands and impossible victories. Perhaps these myths were always more than propaganda. Perhaps they were the seeds of something deeper, the recognition that meaning is born not just in victory, but in the refusal to accept erasure. This new perspective changes the way Sarek approaches his own struggle. The burden of command does not lighten, but he becomes less isolated. Where once he hoarded secrets and strategies, he now reaches out, however awkwardly, to allies and enemies alike, sharing what he knows, seeking what wisdom he can find. He begins to understand that unity, even temporary and fraught with tension, is itself a source of hope. The act of standing together, however fleetingly, is a message to the Tyranids and to the uncaring universe. We are not yet finished. Our stories are not yet over. The legend of the Silent King grows in these dark times, not as an untouchable monarch, but as a symbol of endurance. Word spreads through the scattered tomb worlds, among the battered regiments of the Imperium and the hidden enclaves of the Eldar. The king of the Necrons has not surrendered. Against the most terrifying enemy the galaxy has ever known, he fights not just for his own, but for the right of all life to continue dreaming, remembering, hoping. It is a legend built not on invulnerability, but on vulnerability, on the willingness to keep trying, even when the odds are not just long, but almost meaningless. This is the paradox that sits at the heart of Sarek's new understanding. Hope is not the absence of despair, but its companion. It does not erase the shadow, but shines in spite of it. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, small acts of kindness, courage, and memory begin to take on new significance. A Necron overlord chooses to defend a dying city rather than abandon it. An Imperial commissar refuses to retreat, not for tactical advantage, but to buy time for a single family to escape. An Eldar autarch gives their life for a rival who once swore vengeance. These stories may never change the outcome of the war, but they ripple outward, challenging the tyranny of meaninglessness imposed by the Tyranids. Sarek learns at last that the fight against oblivion is fought in the heart as much as on the battlefield. The persistence of hope, irrational, indefatigable, impossible, is a victory in itself. Even if the Tyranids one day succeed, even if silence falls, there will have been a moment, however brief, when the galaxy chose to remember, to resist, and to hope. This, Sarek realizes, is what it means to be alive. Not to win, but to refuse to be erased without a fight. In this, perhaps, there is a kind of immortality that the hive mind will never know. If this kind of deep, emotional lore exploration resonates with you, make sure you subscribe and join our community of Warhammer fans. Let's keep the memory alive together, because in a galaxy as dark as this, even a single voice can hold back the silence.